old Mercedes diesel, this is not music to your ears. The customer wasn't kidding when they brought me this 300D and said, hey, can you see why this thing won't start? You see, I've been cranking here for a bit, but you have to be a little careful to not crank too much or you can damage the starter. Let's see if we can get this thing started again. It appears that this old diesel has multiple problems. Not only does it not want to start, you noticed it smokes very badly, and then it doesn't want to even shut off. These are probably three of the most common problems I see on these older diesels. In fact, if I look back over the last 10 years at the number of emails I've received from customers who've needed help with their diesels, these are the three big issues. So follow along as we pull this car into the shop and let's try to find out together what's wrong with this engine. When dealing with any type of diesel engine performance problem, you have to start with the basics. These diesel engines require very high compression to run properly. That means starting, performance, fuel economy, power, all these things come back to engine compression. It's kind of like compression's the heart of this engine. So you have to start with a compression test. You don't know how many times we've gotten news from people who have put hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars into these old diesels, only to find out after all that money and work that the engine's tired and needs to be rebuilt. So with this car, I intend to start with a good old physical examination. You're looking here at the Mercedessource physical exam kit. This is a selection of tools and supplies that I have put together to allow an owner to do a compression test and determine the internal health of the engine. Anytime you do a compression test, you have to be very careful to first do a valve adjustment. If the valves are too tight, you could have improper compression readings. So in this kit you'll receive a pair of my custom-made valve wrenches and feeler gauge, which will allow you to adjust the proper clearances on both the intake and the exhaust valves. The kit contains a quality compression gauge along with proper fittings to connect to the Mercedes diesel engine. I prefer to do the compression test through the injector holes, so this will require that you remove the injectors. That also gives you an opportunity to inspect the condition of each one of the fuel injectors that you take out of the cylinder head. So along with the compression tester, we also include a proper injector socket, along with heat shield washers for the injectors, and a complete set of the flexible return hose, which you'll have to replace once you reinstall your fuel injectors. Along with the tools, you'll also receive a complete set of manuals which will help you to diagnose and isolate the specific problems you're having with your engine. These manuals include a diesel engine compression test guide, a booklet on how to properly adjust the valves, and my complete diesel engine diagnostic fault guide. And we'll even throw in some instructions on fuel injector removal and installation. You'll receive a valve cover gasket, and we'll even throw in one of our famous lemon heads to boot. These instructions and the manuals should give you, the diesel owner, the ability to do this procedure on your own, which could save you probably hundreds of dollars over having this done in a shop. Now that you've had a chance to look at the tools and equipment we're going to need to do the exam, let's get started. Adjusting the valves will require removal of the valve cover. This is held on by 4 nuts. Those are easy to get off, but you will have to remove numerous linkages and fittings before you can lift the valve cover up and off the camshaft and rocker arm assembly. The clearance for each valve is checked with the cam lobe pointing straight up from the rocker arm. I have here the 4/1000 feeler gauge for the intake valve, and note it's not even going in under the cam lobe. This means this valve adjustment here is just too tight. The unique bend and angle of these wrenches allows you to get underneath the camshaft to the 2 nuts required to adjust the clearance. In this case, we're going to loosen the nut and then rotate the adjustment nut to the point where I can get the feeler gauge. At this point, the feeler gauge is too loose, so we're going to bring it back out until I just start feeling some drag on the feeler gauge. At that point, we'll lock up the bottom nut. The valve adjustment booklet includes a number of these schematics in the back of the book. This will allow you to check off each time you adjust a valve, and that way you can keep track of which ones you've done and which ones still need to be done. The procedure will require that you rotate the engine over to bring each cam lobe up, straight up from the rocker arm. Full instructions are included in this manual. We'll go ahead now and complete the valve adjustment and get back to you with the results. The valve adjustment is done, and the results are pretty typical of most of these older diesels I work on. In fact, here, 8 out of the 10 valves we adjusted were too tight, and 2 of them were so extremely tight they could have severely impacted the results of a compression test. I'll never forget the time an owner came to me and said, "Hey, you know, the dealer just told me I need a complete overhaul on my engine." And I said to him, I said, "Well, how come?" He said, "Well, they did a compression test and the compression's bad. So it's going to cost me about $6,000 for them to overhaul the engine." I said, "Do you know if they happened to do a valve adjustment before they did the compression test?" No, they didn't say anything about that. So I ended up giving him a set of my wrenches. He went and adjusted his valves, and sure enough, upon rechecking the compression, the engine was just fine. Well, in this case, I think we've got something we can work with. The cam looks good, all the valves adjusted properly, so let's go ahead and move on to the compression test. The compression tester is hooked up to number 2 cylinder, and I'm ready to check compression. I'm going to hold the throttle lever to full open and have my friend inside crank the engine over. Let's see how many pounds we can get out of number 2. Alright, go ahead and start cranking. We now have the results of the compression test. If you go through this with me, number 1 we had 360 pounds, number 2 320, number 3 320, number 4 310, and number 5 320. That's not bad compression considering this engine has 250,000 miles on it. So, with the compression test out of the way and acceptable, we're ready to move on to some other issues. And by the way, it was not the compression that was the cause of the hard starting. After a little check on the glow plugs, sure enough, number 2 and number 5 glow plug were burned out. As far as smoking, we're going to go ahead next and check out the injectors. I have a hunch those injectors are not firing properly, and that may be the chief cause of that terrible smoke at startup.